This is Michael Popok, Legal AF. The 11th Circuit and all of its judges are getting behind the decision made last week by the chief judge of the 11th Circuit that former federal officers like Mark Meadows and Jeff Clark are not going to be able to take their Georgia state criminal prosecution across the street to federal court and then try in some sort of 1-2 dance step, apply sovereign immunity to deny the prosecution at all. Mark Meadows just last week attempted this very same thing. Jeff Clark had also appealed, he being the number 5 or 6 or 8 leader in the Department of Justice during Donald Trump's waning days. He may or may not have been the acting attorney general in the last couple of days of the Trump administration. Who really knows in the chaos that was the final waning days, especially after the insurrection on January 6th. So what we have is the 11th Circuit and a new 3-judge panel relying on legal precedent that was just made 7 days ago to deny the attempt by Jeff Clark to stay his criminal prosecution in state court and have the federal court do that for him while his appeal continued to travel into the 11th Circuit, full briefing and oral argument. What the new 3-judge panel of the 11th Circuit, which represents an Obama appointee and 2 Trump appointees, just to keep it straight, we've got just Judge Rosenbaum, Judge Luck, and Judge Brasher, Luck and Brasher being appointed by Trump. They unanimously decided that Jeff Clark, you are going to lose your appeal about whether you as a former federal officer, could drag your criminal prosecution started by the Fulton County District Attorney across the street to federal court. You are going to lose, this new 3-judge panel said, because last week, in the case of U.S. versus Meadows, which you may have heard about, involving Mark Meadows, the chief judge of the 11th Circuit ruled that former federal officers, in other words, ones that were indicted after they left office, are not going to be able to use the federal officer removal statute under 1442A. It's a limited ability for it looks like a current federal officer, if he gets sued in state court, civilly or criminally, to take the case across the street to the local federal court instead and try to argue some sort of federal defense to a federal judge. Not available. This is the first time in 190 years, hard to believe, that a court of appeals, in this case the 11th Circuit, any court of appeals in America, has ruled that the federal officer removal statute doesn't apply to people who are no longer federal officers. Sounds obvious, but it's the first time. Just happened last week. Jeff Clark, his appeal was sort of hanging in limbo because he was arguing the exact same thing, because he got the exact same decision from the same judge in the federal court, Northern District of Georgia, Judge Clark. And Stephen Clark, the judge, told him, you're a former federal officer, that's one. Secondly, even if you are a federal officer, everything that you did that's listed in the indictment that Fonnie Willis has brought is outside the outer parameters of your federal office. And if you're outside, it's binary. You're either inside the scope of your employment or job description as a federal officer, even if you stretch that to its outer boundaries, or you're outside. And if you're outside, you can't use the federal removal statute. You got to be a federal officer whose activities that are being the subject of the lawsuit or the indictment in this case has to be within your job description and your scope, even if you stretch it like silly putty. And then you have to have a colorable argument that you have a federal defense to the crime. Once Mark Meadows went down, as we said on Legal AF and on hot takes just like this one, that was going to have a cascading effect, a domino effect, to impact all the other former federal officers or federal officer wannabes. Oh, I don't know, Donald Trump and Jeff Clark in the Department of Justice, who are all bound together in a criminal conspiracy indictment in Georgia. It would all prevent them from bringing a similar motion. Jeff Clark just had the unfortunate circumstance that his appeal was sort of hanging in there in the bowels of the 11th Circuit process when Mark Meadows came. Now, if I were him, I would have withdrawn my appeal because of the ruling, but he's going to go through a whole denial process. They are obviously, based on their decision today, not to stay the case, based on the U.S. versus Meadows decision and other, improper legal reasoning within Jeff Clark's brief. I won't bore you with all of the details except the ones that I find interesting. They basically said that the case law you're citing doesn't apply. The case that you really rely on deals with arbitration and whether an arbitration proceeding and a case related to it should be stayed while we look at the federal removal. That doesn't apply here. And they also said the other case you cite may be interesting if you were in some sort of federal court, but you're in a state process, and we're not going to interfere with the state process. And then finally, Jeff Clark made a big deal out of the fact that his indictment came off the heels of a special purpose grand jury in Georgia that didn't indict because it was only an investigative body. He doesn't like the fact that it was an investigative body, and he thinks that he has a right to somehow say that it's still around and it should be stayed. And the appellate court looked at it and said, first of all, special purpose grand jury is no longer in business. They finished their job, issued their report, and as you admit, it's not an indicting body. It doesn't issue an indictment. That went to a regular grand jury. So there we have it. For all of those reasons, as so eloquently put in their order, they ruled as follows. They said that Clark has not made the requisite showing that would entitle him to a stay, a discretionary stay. Former federal officers may not invoke the federal officer removal statute, citing the Meadows case from last week. So Clark cannot show, the order continues, any chance of success on the merits. Without even a chance of success on the merits, there can be no basis for granting a stay. We therefore deny his motion, and that is the order of the court. No dissent, 3-0, 2 Trumpers, one appointee by Obama. So what do we got? Department of Justice, former official, number 8 on the totem pole, tried to interfere with the peaceful transfer of power, tried to put on Department of Justice letterhead. This is what the indictment says. A letter addressed to Georgia and other battleground state election officials suggesting that the Department of Justice had determined there was fraud in the election when there was not, at the behest of Donald Trump, in furtherance of the conspiracy. He gets to stay in Georgia court for his indictment and his ultimate trial, which we think is going to be sometime over the summer. Sorry, Jeff Clark. You, Mark Meadows, ultimately Donald Trump, are not going to be able to take your case to federal court and argue some sort of federal defense. So that's where we are right now. We'll continue to follow what happens we can't get fatigued. We got to follow all of these criminal indictments and civil indictments wherever they are and whoever they are involved with, if they sit at the intersection of law, politics, and justice. And we do that in one place only, on the MeidasTouch Network, on this YouTube channel. You knew that. You've been here before. If you haven't been, free subscribe. Help them get to 2 million free subscribers. We're so close, and it can happen as early as the beginning of 2024 with your help. Pick us up on audio podcast platforms, wherever you get your audio podcast platforms. And then we pull it all together. If you like these kind of hot takes, you're going to love what we do in a full-length podcast we call, wait for it, Legal AF. But then you knew that. It is exactly what you think. It's me and another co-anchor on Saturdays and on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Ben Mycelis, civil rights lawyer, my co-founder and friend on Saturdays, and my friend and colleague Karen Freeman-Agnifilo, former prosecutor, with me on Wednesdays. If you like what I'm doing here, give me a thumbs up, leave a review. It helps with the ratings. It keeps me on the air. And until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF, this is Michael Popok reporting.
Thanks so much for watching. We're only a few subscribers short of 2 million subs. Please subscribe right now to the MeidasTouch YouTube channel for free and help us grow this unapologetically pro-democracy network.